Yes, finally, the 2018 MacBook Pros got leaked. I'm really excited to make this video because I'm obviously excited for the MacBook Pros 2018. And by the way, I actually make a lot of smartphone related videos on the channel. I think about 80% of the videos that I make are about smartphones, not computers. But computers actually interest me much more than smartphones do, hence why I've done a computer science degree. And I don't make that many computer related videos because most of you guys seem to be interested in smartphones more than computers. But now I really want to give you guys some updates on the 2018 MacBook Pros because I use my MacBook Pro for about 10 to 12 hours every single day, sometimes even more than that. So you can see why out of all Apple products, the Mac category is what I'm interested in the most. So grab some snacks, sit back, relax, and here's all the recent leaks and rumors on the 2018 MacBook Pros. Okay, so for those of you who missed my initial 2018 MacBook Pro leaks and rumors episode, the 2018 MacBooks would actually be the biggest update over the past few years. And I don't mean this in terms of the design, because the design would actually stay the same, mostly the same as in 2017 and 2016. I actually mean this in terms of the performance. So right now, the 2017 MacBooks are all running, apart from the MacBook Air, on Intel's 7th generation processor, also known as the Kaby Lake architecture. The 13-inch MacBook Pros, they come with dual-core processors, while the 15-inch MacBook Pros, they actually come with quad-core processors. And this was one of the main reasons why pros actually picked the 15-inch over the 13-inch, the fact that it came with quad-core processors as well as a dedicated GPU. So Apple calling the 13-inch MacBook Pro a Pro didn't actually make sense, apart from the Thunderbolt 3 connectivity, which is actually a Pro connection. So yeah, Thunderbolt 3 is awesome, but apart from this, it was basically just a MacBook Air, just with a different name and slightly thicker and more expensive. Now, Intel's 8th generation architecture, which is Coffee Lake, comes with a very big improvement over Kaby Lake from last year, and that's actually the dual-core processors. They are now quad-core, and the quad-core processors, they are now 6-core processors. It doesn't really apply to all processor models, but it does apply to most. So I even said this in my initial MacBook Pro leaks and rumors video back in January, that Apple could finally be updating the 13-inch MacBook Pro with quad-core processors in 2018, which would be awesome. And in performance, this would actually rival the 2017 15-inch MacBook Pros. So yeah, this would be insanely powerful compared to what we got in 2017 and before. And the good news, the awesome news, is that this has actually been confirmed. So 9to5Mac has actually found the Geekbench score of what appears to be a newly released, or an unreleased actually, MacBook with the model number 15.2, which by the way is actually the model number for not a 15-inch but a 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro. So 15 is actually the number for the new generation, so for example, the 2017 MacBook Pros, they had the model number 14.2 for the Touch Bar MacBook Pro, the one with 4 Thunderbolt ports and Touch Bar, and then the 15-inch had 14.3. 14.1 was actually the entry-level MacBook Pro that came with 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and no Touch Bar. So 15.2 would actually be the model number for the Touch Bar 13-inch MacBook Pro. And in this leak, we can actually see some very interesting things. So obviously the first one is the performance. The performance is just insane. 4,448 points for the single-core performance and 16,607 for the multi-core. And just to give you guys an idea of how insane this score is, the top-of-the-line 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro from last year, that one with the maxed out processor, so a 3.1 GHz Intel 7920 HQ processor, that one got a score of 4,624 for the single core and 15,550 for the multi-core. So yeah, the 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro actually got a higher score for the multi-core performance than the top-of-the-line 15-inch MacBook Pro from 2017. And then the single core was actually very close. Now, the second useful info that we can see in this leak is actually the processor model. So this one seems to be the Intel i7-8559U processor, which yes, it's a quad-core processor for the 13-inch MacBook Pro. And on top of all this, the TDP seems to be 28 watts, which is actually the same as last year of 7567U. So this was the one that was inside the top-of-the-line 13-inch MacBook Pro with a Touch Bar. But this 2018 variant is not only quad-core, but actually has a TDP. The TDP can go as low as 20 watts compared to 23 watts. So it's not just significantly better in terms of performance, but it would also consume less power and make your battery last longer, which is awesome. And then the level 3 cache has also been increased from 4 megabytes to 8 megabytes. So honestly, this is looking like the 7920 HQ processor in terms of performance, which is insane considering that that was a processor inside the 15-inch top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, and this is a processor inside a 13-inch 2018 MacBook Pro. Now, in terms of the clocks, the lowest clock of the 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro would be 2.7 gigahertz, which is actually down from 3.5. But the good news is that it can actually go up to as high as 4.5 gigahertz with Turbo Boost compared to 4 gigahertz. So yeah, we're getting much better performance and also better battery life with a lower clock speed and a lower TDP. So what about the processor itself? When is it coming out? Well, it's already out. So on Intel's page, it says Q2 2018, but no other laptop on the market right now uses this processor, which means that Apple might be the first manufacturer to do so. Now, if you do need a dedicated GPU, by the way, the 15-inch model would still be the best option because the 13-inch would not come with a dedicated GPU, unfortunately, so it will still come with Intel Iris Plus graphics. In this case, it would be the 655 graphics. This is a pretty big improvement, by the way, from last year. 650, this is what we had last year, and we're getting 128 megabytes of EDRAM from 64 megabytes, so basically double, and also higher clock speed. And then the third detail that I want to talk about from this leak is in terms of the RAM. So this MacBook actually comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM, but since this isn't Cannon Lake, it does not support LPDDR4, which is what Apple would be using, or they would need to use this for 32 gigabytes of RAM. This is what Phil Schiller said in an interview. They want to use LPDDR4 because LP comes from low power, and they don't want to sacrifice on the battery life. So unfortunately, the 2018 MacBook Pros, both the 13 as well as the 15-inch, would still be coming with 16 gigabytes of RAM max. So no 32 gigabytes until next year in 2019. Most likely. Also, the 8559U processor actually supports up to 2133 MHz LPDDR3 memory, which is basically the same as last year. And this is what we've seen in the Geekbench leak as well, by the way, reported. So honestly, this looked like a very legit leak. And I do think that this is the exact same processor model that we see in the top of the line 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro, the one with a touch bar. So what about a 15-inch? So in terms of the 15-inch MacBook Pro, this would actually come with a 6-core processor, which is just awesome. 6-core processor in a MacBook Pro, or in a laptop, that's just insane. Now, the exact processor model, it hasn't been leaked yet, but I've actually had to look at all the processors that Intel released, all the 8th generation processors from 2018, and there was one model that actually caught my eye as a possible option for the 15-inch MacBook Pro 2018, and that was the i7-8850H. So this is a 6-core processor with a TDP of 45 watts, which can actually go down to as low as 35 watts, so basically the same as on the current generation 15-inch MacBook Pro. This is the processor that the 15-inch MacBook Pro would need and then use. This one, by the way, also starts at 2.6 gigahertz, and it goes up to as high as 4.3 gigahertz, which is lower than the 13-inch, but keep in mind that this is a 6-core processor, not a 4-core processor. And then I've also looked into some Geekbench scores of this specific processor model, and take a look at this. 5,086 points for the single-core score, and 21,637 for the multi-core. Insane scores on a laptop, because yeah, this is basically just a processor in a laptop, 6 cores. That's why we're getting that massive improvement in the multi-core score, and that's just awesome. Okay, so what about the GPU? Well, honestly, we haven't had any reports on any new GPU models that AMD would be working on. So as far as I'm aware, it would still have to be the exact same GPU as in the 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro. So that would be the 560, the Radeon 560 Pro, which is a pretty decent, it's a mid-range, well, it's pretty bad if you compare it to the Vega 64. Obviously, that's inside the iMac Pro, but you know, you can do 4K video editing at 30 frames per second. It's not too bad. Obviously, the biggest improvements in the 15-inch would be the 6-core processor, and the 13-inch. Keep in mind that this would still come with the integrated GPU. So if you're doing high-end video editing, 4K, and maybe even above, but I don't think anything above would be supported on this MacBook. But I would still suggest going with a 15-inch if you want to do video editing or anything more advanced that involves video production or 3D modeling, because you have that dedicated GPU. Okay, so those were the specs. Now, aside from this, Apple is said to be working on some keyboard improvements for the 2018 models, which is awesome. You probably know how many people are having issues with the new butterfly keyboards on the new MacBooks. I personally went with 3 different MacBooks until I found one that didn't have a keyboard issue, by the way. Apple even got sued because of this, and now they've publicly acknowledged that all of the keyboard issues that I had, and they're actually offering free repairs and replacement for all the affected users. But I might be making a separate video just on this because I have so many things that I want to talk about. So let me know in the comments if you want to see a separate video just on the keyboard issues on the MacBooks. But yeah, it seems like Apple is working on some improvements and fixes for the 2018 MacBooks. I'm really looking forward to seeing those implemented. These were all the updates that I had for the 2018 MacBook Pros. There were a few model numbers that got leaked and possibly a new MacBook Air, but maybe I'll be covering those maybe in a separate video once we get some more updates on that. But yeah, so far it's looking like a big, very massive performance improvements for both the 13 as well as the 15-inch MacBook Pro in terms of the processor. Now keep in mind that Apple would be switching to their own processors around 2020 or so, or 2021. It won't happen with a 15-inch or 13-inch. It would probably happen with a brand new MacBook, 12-inch MacBook that would run on an Apple, I don't know, A15 or 14 or 13 processor. So yeah, this has been pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the new upcoming 2018 MacBooks, and subscribe if you want to see more interesting leaks and rumors videos like this one. Enable notifications by tapping on that bell so that you get notified as soon as a new video comes out. Feel free to give us a like if you enjoyed it to let me know. Other than that, I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.